Hello, and thank you so much for joining me again. And I am so excited to be talking about Newfoundland again. Now, if you haven't seen last week's video, you won't realize that this is part two. Last week I talked all about the western side of Newfoundland, and this is all being taken place of my 7-week trip that I did, epic road trip all around Newfoundland, and these are some of my experiences and photos and stories and everything else that I saw in this amazing province. Now, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them down below in the comments and I will answer them. Now, if Newfoundland is somewhere that really does interest you and you'd like to go and see it, just let me know. I'm actually planning on doing a tour over there next year, as long as the all those safety protocols are put in place and we're able to travel, which should be next year, I'm hoping. So if you are interested at all in joining in on a tour with me, just let me know, and I can always give you information as I start to plan and see what that landscape looks like. So I'm also in this one, I've been talking to my friend Sarah over in Newfoundland, and we've been discussing Newfie slang, and so through this one I'm going to start sprinkling a little Newfie slang in there and just telling you what that is. So if you ever do, and when you do go over to Newfoundland, you can definitely understand some of the things that people are going to be saying to you. Now let's jump right in. First off, again, here is my kindergarten drawing of Newfoundland, of where I went. Obviously, the yellow is everywhere that I went. Today, we are going to be talking about the places in green. First, we're going to start up top, right in the top corner there, and that is a Viking land. Now, this part of Newfoundland is really cool. It's remote, it's windy, it's all those things rolled up into one. Now, this here is Meadows, and this is one of the National Historic Sites in Canada. It is a Viking settlement, and it's also a UNESCO World Heritage Center. I love UNESCO World Heritage Centers. I like to find them wherever I travel because it just means it's going to be a super cool place. Well, that's how I at least think of it. Now, they did find that Leif Erikson remained in this area of North America and Canada more than 1,000 years ago. And really, they only discovered this settlement in the 1960s. So it's quite a new discovery, and they're uncovering things all the time. So you want to come in here, you get when you go into the park here, you get a guide and they show you around, and then you also have free time to wander around everywhere here. Now, the views are just absolutely beautiful. They have recreated what the settlement would have probably looked like. And you can go into all of the different houses that are here. They also have live actors representing all the Vikings, and they will tell you what daily life is like as a Viking here back in that day. They have real fires and people knitting and all sorts of stuff. So it's really interactive and really cool. They also have stuff that you can throw on and obviously take pictures as a Viking. Why wouldn't you? I'm all for dressing up in funny costumes and just enjoying being actually immersed into the actual culture there. There are actually a few different areas here. Meadows is the national park one. There are other Viking settlements that are situated all along this area. So there are different places that you can go and see different things and learn new things and basically talk to people that are very knowledgeable about the Viking settlements and just gain all that knowledge and see beautiful views. Like taking this, like you just take walks in the middle of like these gigantic fields and you can see all these different settlements that they have recreated and really created a magical place. There's always boats everywhere. I don't know if this is like part of the set, or if it's just a fishing boat, because they are scattered everywhere throughout Newfoundland. But specifically here, I would always run into like these little boats here. But it just makes for beautiful photos. Now, you also get all the tourists, like little tourist shops. It's not a big community here. If you want a bigger community, you go to St. Anthony. That is the big city in the north up here. Here is just like small town little stuff. Now, one of the things that I love to point out in this photo is up at the top, you'll see that it says information, local jams, and Newfie stuff. I love that they just put Newfie stuff in there because, you know, you can just imagine that conversation. So, what should we say we sell here? Newfie stuff. So, it's just adorable. I love it. While I was up here, I stayed in this really great bed and breakfast right in the heart of where all the Viking stuff is. It wasn't in St. Anthony. It was right in with the Viking culture and stuff. But it is absolutely beautiful. You have your own balcony. You have this view. It was a really great experience. I actually stayed in Eric the Red's room. Yeah, thanks very much. So from here, I just toured around this whole like neighborhood area. You would come across views like this all the time, you know, little fishing boats, places where, okay, now this here is called a stage. Now it's a fishing shack, but every maritime province, actually, did you know that Newfoundland is not part of the Maritimes? It is Atlantic Canada. And even though the Maritimes is grouped in with Atlantic Canada as well, Newfoundland is not actually part of the Maritimes. Now, I don't know who kicked who out, but I just thought that was a really interesting fact that not a lot of people know. And I didn't know that until my friends in Newfoundland told me that when I was over there. So these ones are called stages. So I guess it's, you know, they're setting the stage to go fishing. That's my take on it. But they're absolutely beautiful, and they come in all different shapes, sizes, and colors. Red is usually very popular. Lots of flags out here. I find them a lot more out on the East Coast than you do see them on the West Coast. And you will always usually see a skidoo out and about somewhere. Now, this here, I don't know about you, but I could totally see myself living in this house out in the middle of nowhere with a gorgeous view and just being able to relax and chill. There's so many places in Newfoundland that are like this, that it's just, I think it would be doable except for the winter. I think I'd have to be a snowbird. Now, from here, from St. Anthony and down in the Vikings, I looped down and around and I went over to Gander. Now, this is my friend Sarah. She was so gracious enough to let me stay with her for about a week. I met her while we both worked on cruise ships, so she's an old friend, and it was so great to be able to see her in her actual home. She was the best tour guide and met her whole family. We'll get to her whole family next week when we talk about the east side of Newfoundland, because they are hilarious. Now, from Sarah's, I basically just used her house, her stay as just like a pivot point where I would just do day trips. There were specific places that I knew that I wanted to go. And I just traveled all around, so I would pick different places each day. Now, I would always come across these stages, and I thought they were really cool. And again, all of them are different, all of them are super cool, and it's just something that we don't see normally, and it's completely unique to the east, the Atlantic coast. Now, from here, I love Newfoundlanders so much with their signs, their names of places and everything. Now, I've never seen Blow Me Down Lane, but that is the best lane. I would love to live on this lane. And it's just lots of really cool things. Also, this is up in Twillingate. Now, Twillingate is basically Iceberg Alley. It is one of the best places to view icebergs. I wasn't here during the springtime ice thaw, but I know I do want to come back here during that time because it is just incredible. Now you also have boats. I hiked up to this part here, and it was just a super unique lighthouse, and they have really cool things. I also found in Twillingate my super cool house that I would love to live in. It just looks like a witch's house. And then from here, Twillingate is basically the gateway to go into some of the smaller islands that are up north there. And these islands were actually my favorite part of Newfoundland. Now, when you get onto the ferry, it's a small ferry boat, and that's my car in front there. And I've heard that it has changed now, but when I took the ferry, so I went to 2 different islands. The first island I went was to Change Island, and then the second one I went to Fogo Island. The ferry takes you to both, but you can obviously stop over in each one. When you got off, when the ferry docked, whichever way you were pointed, that's the way you drove off. So I was pointed away from the dock, so I had to back out. There was no turning around. There's nothing like that. You had to back up all the way until you could turn around in basically the parking area. I would like to say that I, gave women drivers a really good name that day, but I can also say that some women gave women drivers a really bad name. I would just shake my head, but it was definitely an adventure. Now, in Change Islands, they have this really cool Newfoundland pony sanctuary. Now, this is one of the only surviving native purebred ponies in North America, and they are native to Newfoundland. Right now, there's only fewer than 400 of these ponies. And this sanctuary, you can go in, you make a small donation, you can hang out with the ponies, you can go into their pen and take photos or just meet them. The people that work there are super kind and super nice, and they will introduce you and tell you more about how it's going and more about the ponies, which I thought was super cool. Again, on Change Island is basically I just drove around. It's a really small island. I drove around multiple times the whole island, and there are great hiking trails. Personally, I didn't get out and hike anywhere. I just went around and drove everywhere to take photos because the light and just the unique look of this island was so beautiful. These, again, are other stages, and they had them scattered all throughout the whole area. I just loved the look of them. When I got to Change Island, well, even before I got to Change Island, there's not a lot of places to stay. I was also in the tail end of tourist season, so either places were closed or the few places that were open were booked. I had actually contacted one place, I think it was an Airbnb or something, and it's the only one that I could find, and I contacted them. They told me that they didn't have any places, but they knew someone that would have a place in their house that had a room that I could stay in for the night. He actually worked for the pony sanctuary and among other things. So I was like, okay, sure. Why not? So they just gave me his phone number, and I called him, and he's like, oh yeah, sure. It was inexpensive. It's paid for the night. And again, there was like no address really. I kind of maneuvered my way and had him on the phone, finding exactly where he was. I had the street name, but you couldn't really see any addresses. So this was the house that I eventually found and stayed in. He had some cute kittens, but again, the Newfoundland hospitality won out. Super nice. He was there. He offered me dinner and everything. So it was just a really nice, out of the box way to stay somewhere. So even if you can't find somewhere to stay, talk to the locals. They'll probably know someone that is looking to rent out a room or is able to put someone up. Now, while I was here, they had amazing weather. It was just the stormy clouds and then the sun peeking through during sunset. So again, I was just driving around all over the place looking for the views and looking for the light that was here. And then obviously the big rain clouds came in. They didn't actually hit where I was until that night, but it was just really, really beautiful. Now, the next day, I only stayed one night. I could have went back and stayed a couple nights because there was a few hiking trails that I heard that were really great. Now, this is something that just blew my mind. I was on the ferry. You can get out of your car and they have like a little waiting area, and this was on the bulletin board, and I remember calling home and saying, who wants to go in with this? So it was basically an ad for a 2-bedroom house for sale on Fogo Island, which is exactly where I was going, and it was 2 bedrooms, view of the ocean, plus it included a shed and everything else. Like, it seemed perfect, and it was only $75,000 or nearest offer. Now, I don't know about where you live, but where I live in Vancouver, there's nothing you can get for $75,000. So to know that you can get this was absolutely mind-blowing. And I could totally live here during the spring, summer, and fall. Now, Fogo Island is a very art island. It has all of these, well, I shouldn't say all. They have 4, and they're constantly building more of these artist in residency buildings. So basically what artists do is they apply to be a resident artist in these buildings, and everything's taken care of for this one, and you basically have 1 to 3 months that you can stay here and work on your craft and your art and everything. And then you just have to either have open houses or display your art or teach lessons and stuff like that in exchange, so that the community can get involved as well. But they're just really beautiful, and there's such a stark contrast that the architects that have designed these ones on Fogo Island are so cool. They're all different. They all look a little different, and they're all in remote places. So you don't know exactly where they are. You just got to drive around and kind of hunt them down and trying to figure out where exactly they are. I only found 2, but I would love to go back and be an artist in residence, or just go back and stay here longer. Now, Fogo Island is also very famous for Fogo Island Inn. Now, this one is a very high-end hotel, and it's very famous. Oprah famous because Oprah stayed here as well. Now, this here, if you have a little pocket change left over, you'll want to stay here. Rooms start at $2,000 a night. Very inexpensive. But this does include all your meals and everything else included. So it is all inclusive, but you know, $2,000, and that's getting you just on the bottom floor. If you go up any floors, you're looking at a lot more. But it is, you should really look it up online, because it is an absolutely gorgeous hotel, and is just someplace that you would really, if you do have some extra money, definitely I would recommend staying here. And it's just views. I love how it's all on stilts as well, just to get you right onto the water. It must be great watching storms here. Okay, so this is another stage, and is just scattered everywhere around here. The views of just the wide open spaces and just the houses and stuff scattered around there just makes this place very magical for me. Now, in here, I want to tell you just 1 or 2 slang terms that I was talking to Sarah about. Now, there's some that she was saying that are very, very popular and very important in Newfoundland slang, especially nowadays. If you are looking for a different word to awesome, and I say awesome all the time, their word over there is deadly. So as she says, you would say, that's some deadly. So you would say, you know, super deadly, or I guess that's the West Coast way of saying it. But deadly is the word awesome, basically, over in Newfoundland. So you would hear deadly more than you would hear awesome. Now, another term that she also told me about was skeet. Now, skeet is basically a trashy person, but there is also two types of skeets. When I think of skeet, the way that she described it to me, it's, if you remember that song by TLC, No Scrubs, it basically reminds me of a scrub. So there is a townie skeet. Now, townies and bays, it's basically how they describe people. It's how you know where people are from. So townies are obviously from big towns, and bay people are from bay communities. So there's a townie skeet, and then there's a bay skeet. Now, a townie skeet is usually into petty crime, drugs. They're a little bit rough looking. She's saying that they have like really cheap, ugly tattoos, and they smoke. And as she puts it, they smoke to a tilt. Now, bay skeets, she says that they're a lot more rough around the edges and very tough. But they also will wear PJ pants to drink in the shed. And yes, drinking in the sheds is huge over in Newfoundland. So if people ask you to, if you meet some locals and they ask you to go drink in the shed, you know, take it as a compliment, because that's where everyone hangs out. She was also saying that bay skeets, if you're boyfriend and girlfriend, they will usually wear matching jackets to go on their skidoos in the winter time. So you can all imagine those types of people and the types of people that we have in around here, wherever you live. We have those types of stereotypes. So we back there, they call them skeets. Now, this here, I love the scenery here. Lots of red buildings, and it just makes everything stand out, and it makes it very, very Canadian. Now, this here is Cindy and Billy. When I was in the lineup to take the first ferry over to Change Island, they were heading over to Fogo Island first, and they were actually the first person in line, and I was behind them. You kind of don't know. I kind of got confused on if I was in the right line, if I was going to be getting off first or second, because I didn't know if Change Island was first or if Fogo Island was first. So they were outside of the car. I got out of the car and just, struck up a conversation with them. They're also Canadian from Ontario, and we exchanged numbers because they were going to be on Fogo Island for a couple nights. And since I was going to be there the next day, they invited me to come over for dinner at their Airbnb and just hang out. We had an amazing time. And it's just one of those things that you want to be very open about who you talk to and strike up conversations, because you never know where it's going to lead. And I'm still friends with them today. At the end of the day, I found this kitchen party ad at the bed and breakfast that I was staying at in Fogo Island, and after dinner we headed out here. Basically, it's just like little live music in wherever. Sometimes it's in a shed, sometimes it's in a kitchen, sometimes it's in a pub. So you just want to find out where these things are, and then you'll be able to have a good time, have some drinks with some locals, and have some live music. So that's the north for me right now. There's so many lots of things to do. I want to give you one last, there's two really funny slang terms. So this one again comes from my friend Sarah, and she's like, this one's super embarrassing, but I kind of have to say it because it's just who I am. And she was saying that in different parts in Newfoundland, it's not all throughout Newfoundland, but in different parts in Newfoundland, they use this term. And her mom would use it all the time, and then she taught obviously Sarah and her sister. So she was saying that when you have like knots in your hair, so if you have knots or your hair is tangled and stuff like that, They wouldn't say, oh, your hair is naughty, or your hair, you've got tangled hair. Basically, they would call it a clitty. So you would say, or you got some clits in your hair. Now, they didn't know what that meant, obviously, when they were younger, and then when they got to be older, the other term for version of that word, they were telling their mom that they couldn't use that term anymore because it was just, it could be taken in a different way, obviously. And then another term that I loved was put the wood in the hole. So you put the wood in the hole, and this means close the door. I would have never guessed that one, but I thought it was super hilarious, and I'm going to bring that to the West Coast. I'm going to start using that one all the time. Now, this is how you get a hold of me. Websites, Instagram, Facebook, email. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me. Next week, I am going to be doing the final segment of Newfoundland. I have the royal we all the time. I'm going to be talking about the East Coast. Now, this is where I will be talking about getting screeched in, finding new people to live with that I didn't know who they were, having to light fires every morning to warm the house, and just trying to get out and explore every little square inch of this province. So meet me back here next week, same place, same time. Again, if you have any questions or any thoughts of what you want me to talk about, put them down in the comments, or you can also direct message me and I will put it into the lineup. So I hope you guys have a great night, and I will see you next week. Bye.